Enoch, the giant who welcomed visitors from beyond the stars. I am Enoch, and I once witnessed the sky tear open with lights that belonged neither to the sun nor the moon. Visitors, children of the distant stars, arrived when Earth still knew nothing of fear. They carried secrets from worlds far beyond our own, and their presence awakened an ambition that humanity had never felt before. From their connection with us, the giants were born. I saw glimpses, visions, of great waters crashing down upon creation like the roar of another world. From a realm you can only dream about, I will share the extraordinary life I witnessed. Long before any great flood washed over the land, humans lived in peace, in small villages beneath the ancient trees and the endless sky. But balance never lasts forever. It wasn't long before the harmony between the heavens and the earth fractured. From above, mysterious beings descended, not to rule, but to guide from a distance. Yet they grew captivated by the beauty of humankind and abandoned their original purpose, giving rise to the giants. In those days, I, Enoch, was already an old man. My life had always been one of contemplation. That morning, I sat upon a great stone in the valley, eyes set on the horizon. Something was breaking deep within the earth, and I felt it in my chest as clearly as breath. My son, Methuselah, trusted my intuition. He understood my silence, and I could sense his growing worry as the air around us grew heavier. Though I foresaw danger, I chose not to alarm the village. I simply asked Methuselah to remind anyone who would listen about the importance of unity and vigilance. The world back then still carried the purity of its first breath. Creatures did not yet fear humankind, and even the river's gentle current responded to our prayers. Nama was a young woman admired for her bravery. Her voice was soft, like the eastern wind, and many believed that when she touched the water, the whirlpools calmed. She came to warn us. The river had turned cloudy and restless. I felt her unease, for it echoed my own. The earth was expressing sorrow in many ways. Some neighbors spoke of faint tremors beneath their feet, as if the world was shifting after a long sleep. But I knew this was no gentle awakening. The moment I stepped into my hut, a sudden roar shook the valley. The ground trembled beneath me, and my heart pounded wildly. The quake lasted only seconds, yet it was enough to throw the entire village into panic. In the chaos, Noah, my own child, came running to me. He sought comfort, trembling from the shock we had just endured. I held him close and told him it might simply be the earth calling for care. But deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Not long after the first tremor, fear slowly gave way to brief relief. No huts had collapsed, and no one was harmed. Yet the unease on the villagers' faces, especially those who knew me well, only deepened. I felt certain that the tremor was a warning of something much larger moving beneath the surface of our world. I could not name it, but something inside me shouted that life would never be the same again. Far from our village stood Mount Hermon, a towering peak untouched by humankind. It was said to be the dwelling place of those who had descended from the heights in an age long forgotten. Those who had glimpsed these beings swore they possessed pale, smooth skin, bodies both powerful and elegant, and faces resembling humans, yet unmistakably different. Their beauty carried a strangeness, a quiet brilliance that felt as if it came from another world. Among those who descended were Semeyaza and Azazel, watchers from above who studied humanity from a distance. Semeyaza confided in Azazel that something about human women stirred a strange longing within him. Though they did not belong to his world, they carried a kind of light that drew him in, awakening emotions he had never known. Azazel felt uneasy at his words, yet curiosity tugged at him as well. They both knew they were meant to remain careful. Humans were still young, still instinctive, and their role was only to observe, not to interfere. But Semeyaza had grown weary of silent watching. He had witnessed the struggles of humankind and wondered whether they should intervene, whether they should share something that might lessen humanity's burdens. Azazel considered the idea of sharing transformative knowledge, though he understood that wisdom alone does not make a people worthy. Only what they choose to do with it does. They both knew that if they crossed that boundary, nothing would remain the same. They would change, and humanity would change with them. A quiet pact began to take shape between them, marking the first fracture in an ancient order. The laws they lived by strictly forbade direct intervention. Doing so meant disturbing a fragile balance. At that very moment, a faint tremor rippled across the earth, like an ancient sigh, as if the world itself sensed that a forgotten rule was about to be broken. Azazel felt the earth trying to warn them, but Semeyaza interpreted the tremor differently, as a sign that perhaps humanity was finally ready for what was coming. They remained silent, as though time itself had paused. In that suspended moment, something invisible began to take form. The following days, the village tried to return to its usual calm. Women tended to their children. Men herded animals across quiet fields. But beneath the surface of ordinary life, a shadow of worry drifted through the air, unspoken, yet deeply felt. People looked into my eyes seeking reassurance I could not give. Nama, whose gaze once held joy, now carried a faint trace of fear. She told me some neighbors had noticed that wild animals were becoming scarce, and birds seemed to avoid the river entirely. She wondered whether they were fleeing from something. I answered quietly that nature is wise, far wiser than we often realize, and that it was trying to tell us something. We needed to remain watchful, very watchful. As the days passed, the nights no longer brought me peace. Faint visions surrounded me, tall silhouettes watching from a place beyond my understanding. One evening, seeking clarity and calm, I walked toward the edge of the village. But the moment I stepped outside, something made me stop. There, standing on the path between the trees, was a being unlike anything I had ever seen. Instantly, I knew this meeting was not a coincidence. The creature seemed to have been waiting for me. I spoke softly, asking where it came from and why it stood there. Its curious gaze shifted upward, and I followed. My heart skipped a beat. Far beyond, atop a high rock bathed in the last light of day, stood a tall and majestic figure. Its posture was upright, noble, radiating a calm far beyond human reach. It watched me, unmoving as stone. Even from a distance, I sensed a beauty that was strange, otherworldly, something meant for a realm not our own. A chill raced down my spine. Was it one of the beings mentioned in ancient tales? Deep within my bones, I felt certain that something vast and unknown would soon emerge from those old mountains. Our village would survive, I believed, but it would never again be the same. An invisible force began guiding me, pulling me toward a path I had not yet chosen. That encounter marked the beginning of my awakening. Everything had been foreshadowed. The Watchers understood that the road they had chosen would reshape our world and everyone living within it. Dark clouds gathered overhead, as if some higher force was trying to warn them not to continue. With unwavering resolve, they descended the slopes of Hermon, fully aware they were crossing a line from which there was no return. What they were about to do would break the rules they themselves had sworn to follow, and would forever disturb the balance that had existed since the dawn of many worlds. They had chosen to live among humankind. Semeyaza glanced calmly at the glowing orbs that hovered silently above them. He assigned them their purpose: to observe our world, mark safe paths, hidden shelters, and unseen dangers. His thoughts wandered to his distant home, its crystal waters called Ashtara, glowing beneath 3 moons. Azazel agreed, though he remarked that our world was different. Here, living beings endured hardship and could not reach the harmony granted to the place he once came from. Semeyaza nodded softly. They had been entrusted with protecting young and fragile worlds, not through force, but by quietly watching their growth. Just then, one of the luminous orbs detected something unusual. A human whose nature did not match the rest. Something in that spirit seemed to bend the patterns of the natural order. Curious, Azazel wondered aloud what kind of human could draw the attention of an Orhalim. Meanwhile, he and Semeyaza moved steadily beneath the treetops, guided by the gentle moonlight. They sensed the entire forest watching them in quiet awe, as if this corner of the world had never witnessed such a presence before. In that moment, Semeyaza's gaze settled on a lone figure walking slowly toward the village's edge. What struck him was her steady stride, calm, grounded, carrying a quiet strength rare among humans. Then he understood. Within her burned a hidden spark, a fire woven into humanity in the earliest days of the world, when Earth was still young and unnamed. He felt a powerful pull toward her, something he could no longer ignore. Semeyaza knew that approaching this human meant breaking an ancient boundary, yet he found himself moving forward. Nama shivered the instant she glimpsed the silhouettes of the watchers. Something deep within her warned that these beings did not belong to the ordinary world. Were they wandering spirits? Or perhaps ancient ones tied to the high peak spoken of in old legends? Her heartbeat quickened as she spoke boldly, asking where they came from, feeling their presence disrupt the very air around them. Semeyaza gave no answer, only a quiet, unreadable look. The fracture was complete now. They would no longer observe from afar. They had descended fully, choosing to walk alongside humankind. The sun, one of countless lights scattered across creation, witnessed something not seen since the earliest ages. As it rose, its golden rays swept gently across the rooftops of our village. News traveled quickly. No one could recall anything like what they had seen. Though these beings possessed a beauty far beyond human form, they also carried an unnameable mystery. The watchers believed that I, an old man among humans, held a spirit newly awakened, rare in its clarity. Perhaps, if fate allowed, I could become a bridge between our world and theirs. Semeyaza appeared before me, with Azazel at his side, explaining that they came from distant realms to share knowledge unknown to us. Calmly, I asked about their origin, curious about the kind of kingdom capable of shaping such extraordinary beings. Semeyaza spoke of his homeland, a realm called Ashtara, lying under an endless sky, among the stars illuminated by a great cosmic source. They had watched our world for centuries, silent and apart. His words stunned me. I had never imagined stars as worlds of their own, or that vast abysses separated one realm from another. My mind struggled to grasp the scale of what he described. Looking up at the sky, I searched for answers I knew I would not find. Among the gathering crowd, Azazel noticed a quiet young girl with a gentle presence and striking simplicity. Her name was Saphira, and her eyes seemed capable of perceiving what others could not. When her name was spoken in front of the visitors, Sephira felt a warm flush rise to her cheeks, yet she kept her gaze steady on Azazel, drawn by the dignified presence standing before her. As their eyes locked, the world around Sephira began to fade. Strange visions swept through her mind. Endless skies filled with radiant light. Landscapes painted with colors she had never known. Colossal structures drifting in the void, all shrouded in the sorrow of some distant memory. Methuselah watched with rising dread, feeling his heart pound with a cold, shadowed fear. Though curious about Semeyaza and Azazel, I sensed that a union between two such different kinds of beings would bring more sorrow than blessing. I, Enoch, offered the first warnings, yet even I believed at the time that these visitors would bring brighter and more prosperous days to my people. But the bond between those who descended from the heights and the children of humankind broke an ancient universal law. From that choice, a seed was planted, one whose consequences had yet to be understood. In awe of the visitors' brilliance and wisdom, few realized that a door had been opened to something that was never meant to exist. Time continued to flow quietly among the children of the earth. The visitors, once regarded with wonder, soon became familiar figures in our daily lives. Life began to shift slowly under the teachings of Semeyaza and Azazel, though the two guided us in very different ways. Semeyaza revealed knowledge meant to enrich our lives, always cautious, never to disturb the natural balance of the world. One clear night beside the river, he taught Methuselah and me how to read the stars, explaining their movements, how they mark time and seasons. He told us that every light in the sky followed a path traced in the early ages of the cosmos, and by understanding these paths, our people could sow better, harvest better, and live better. Methuselah, astonished by these lessons, confessed his worry. With such wisdom, would we lose the humility that kept us grounded? But Semeyaza, calm and steady, promised that his intention was to bring balance and prosperity, never to change our nature or bring harm. Meanwhile, Azazel began teaching a chosen few the craft of shaping metal, how to wield fire to forge spears, blades, and tools of great power. He claimed these weapons would secure strength and dominance, ensuring that other tribes respected and feared us. In the quiet of her home, Sephira tried to share her concerns with Azazel. She could see what others could not, that weapons would draw the attention of neighboring villages and inevitably lead to conflict and war. But Azazel insisted that power brought safety and respect, and that withholding knowledge would only doom us. Sephira then asked a question that unsettled him. Can a being of great power truly walk among humans without disturbing the balance of the world? Her words carried a depth of insight he had not expected from a human. A seed of doubt took root within him. In a quiet corner of the village, Nama and Semeyaza spoke softly under a sky full of stars. Azazel's teachings had begun to trouble them both. Semeyaza admitted his fear that perhaps it was too soon for humans to wield such power. That very night, a radiant light began to descend, a sign that a higher force had turned its attention toward us. Warned by the villagers, I fixed my eyes on the figure standing before us, hardly daring to breathe. The being resembled Semeyaza and Azazel, yet something set him apart, a calm, unwavering power, an authority that required no words. His name was Uriel. He warned me clearly that the cosmic laws had been broken, and that those who descended had crossed a boundary meant never to be breached. He urged me to warn my people of the difficult days approaching. Astonished, I asked how he knew my name and where he had come from. Confusion weighed heavily on me. Until then, I had believed with all sincerity that the arrival of these visitors was a blessing. But Uriel declared with firm authority that he was a guardian of the boundaries set in the early ages of the stars, and that the knowledge given to us had been taken without permission. 3 new beings were already growing in the wombs of our women, beings not entirely human, whose arrival would usher in a time of great trial. Just then, from the shadows, Semeyaza and Azazel stepped forward, their movements slow and cautious. I saw on their faces a mix of respect and fear, for before them stood Uriel, one who acted under the ancient order that shaped stars and worlds. Semeyaza spoke first, his voice calm yet tense, insisting that he had never intended harm, that he simply wished to bring understanding to humankind. Uriel regarded them with unwavering seriousness. He reminded them that they had broken a fundamental law, merging with earthly beings and creating something never meant to exist. Their actions, he said, had placed the cosmic order in grave danger. Azazel replied with conviction, insisting that they had given humanity knowledge so we would no longer wander blindly but shape our own destiny. But Uriel answered that they had crossed a boundary drawn with great wisdom. That knowledge granted too early becomes a hidden poison disguised as a gift. The day would come, he warned, when these gifts would turn against all of us, humans and watchers alike. Many things had changed since the watchers descended onto Hermon. Our village had grown accustomed to the presence of the star-born visitors, viewing them as teachers and protectors. Yet no one truly understood the magnitude of the union between 2 worlds. From the bonding of Semeyaza and Nama, the twins Damal and Ahan were born. Meanwhile, Azazel and Sapphira conceived a son they named Nimruth. Tall as young trees, the 3 children stood out unmistakably among us. Their appearance inspired awe, but also a quiet, instinctive unease in any who gazed at them too long. Their height defied the limits of nature, and their hands carried strength that could tear stone from the earth. Yet true understanding did not exist within them. They sensed only their immense power, unaware that this very power would bring fear rather than affection. One day, Nimruth attempted to display his strength before the children of the village. More than a single home collapsed in the spectacle that followed. It was not only wood and clay that fell that day. The illusion of control crumbled with it. In that moment, every eye widened in shock, and a deep, instinctive fear swept through the crowd, for everyone realized that we were living beside beings who could destroy us without effort. Methuselah, his eyes heavy with doubt, warned the people about the unnatural nature of all that had been unfolding. He reminded them that since the star-born children arrived, we had ignored the signs right before us. Their offspring carried strength far beyond anything we could control. I tried to calm my neighbors, telling them there was no malice in the hearts of these giants, only a force they did not yet understand, a force they still needed to learn to master. But even as I spoke, an unease surged within me like a rising tide. Seeking clarity, I withdrew into the quiet forest nearby, a sanctuary of ancient trees whose stillness had always comforted me. There, surrounded by towering trunks and deep shade, I closed my eyes and let the whispers of nature wash over me, as if the earth itself were trying to soothe my troubled spirit. With every breath, I felt the physical world dissolve around me. Something within me reached beyond time, brushing against a reality no human language could fully describe. Suddenly, I was struck by a vision, violent, overwhelming. A vast ocean surging toward the land, waters rising with unstoppable force. My heart pounded painfully as I saw an enormous wave rise along the horizon, crashing straight toward our village. A strangled cry formed in my throat, and just as the wave was about to swallow everything I loved, I opened my eyes. The stillness of the forest stood in stark contrast to what I had just seen. I knew it was no ordinary dream. It was a warning. I hurried back toward the village, knowing I had to speak to my people and face the undeniable truth. A devastating storm was approaching. Even the earth felt the weight of these days, and what began as peace had shifted into a constant, almost unbearable tension. I had believed that our village would prosper with the knowledge Semeyaza and Azazel had imparted. But instead of abundance, scarcity descended upon us. Nimruth, Arhan, and Damal had grown into towering giants. They were unlike any human, and feeding their endless hunger became nearly impossible. They devoured our harvests in ceaseless gulps, consuming weeks of hard labor in a single day. Our storage emptied rapidly, and soon even the children lacked enough to eat. It was then that Methuselah reminded me of the warning delivered by Uriel, the message that the Starborn had brought with them a shadow as well as light. A chill ran through me. Uriel's steady, resonant voice still echoed deep within my mind, and suddenly another vision struck me, clear, powerful, unmistakable. I saw a massive wooden vessel drifting upon dark, raging waters beneath a sky roaring with ancient storms. Mountains and cities were swallowed by a vast abyss, and I understood then that what I saw was more than a vessel. It was the final echo of a dying world. I confessed to my son that Uriel's warning weighed heavily on my spirit. The end of an age was drawing near, though I had never imagined how deep that abyss truly was. Yet I felt certain the worst had not yet revealed itself. Things grew even worse when the giants, no longer satisfied with destroying our fields, began invading nearby lands. People from those villages blamed us for bringing such creatures into the world. One night, gathered around the central fire, a silent crowd stared at me with anger and unease. The spears in their hands frightened me less than the accusation in their eyes. Their leader demanded justice, blaming us for the destruction the giants had caused. I tried to reassure them, explaining that these young beings did not yet understand the power they carried, that only time could teach them balance and restraint. But the crowd erupted in fury, surging toward Azazel's home, where they found him standing under the dim moonlight, calm, indifferent to the chaos he had helped unleash. Semeyaza, desperate, begged for patience and understanding, pleading with them not to lose control. But Azazel answered with pride and defiance, reminding them of his true nature. A being who had observed our world long before it first drew breath. At that moment, clouds began to swirl violently, and the air grew suddenly cold. The sky thickened, as if even the light itself had been suspended. Then came the first rumble of thunder, a deep, mournful cry rising from the heart of the earth. The storm struck not like a wave, but like a decisive blow. From a distance, I watched with a knot tightening in my chest. Lightning fell with an unnatural slowness, illuminating terrified faces as people scattered in panic. What I witnessed that night filled me with both awe and dread. I knew then that the bond between humankind and the Starborn was beginning to fracture beyond repair. A few days later, beneath a cold moon, Azazel gathered a group of villagers near the forest edge. His face reflected a dangerous blend of restrained anger and unyielding determination as he prepared a strange substance glowing faintly in the torchlight. Azazel told the villagers he had seen their suffering and would grant them a gift to protect them forever. One of the men watched in fascination as Azazel mixed dark soil, sticky resin, and a yellow powder that rose with a sharp, sulfur-like scent. He explained that this gift came from the depths of the earth itself, and that no human force could extinguish its fire once unleashed upon their enemies. Soon, the mixture was used in lamps to light homes and pathways. It burned longer than any flame they had ever known, though they had yet to witness its true power. For a brief moment, the village regained a fragment of its lost confidence, believing itself protected by Azazel's gift. But that peace, like all fragile things, did not last. Weeks later, the giants, Nimruth, Ahan, and Damel, returned to the neighboring village and ravaged it with brutal force. But this time, the people there were prepared. They fought back. In the fierce struggle, Nimruth was struck in the leg by a spear and collapsed in a thunderous roar of pain. Though he survived, the giants returned home wounded and humiliated. Blinded by rage and bruised pride, Nimruth demanded vengeance from Azazel. Once again, Azazel gathered the villagers in the thinning woods, promising to reveal unimaginable wonders if they would defend his honor. Tempted by promises of absolute safety and power, the villagers secretly prepared dozens of containers filled with the incendiary substance he had taught them to create. Without warning, a rain of fiery projectiles descended upon the neighboring settlement, turning it into an uncontrollable storm of flames. Every frantic attempt to extinguish the fire failed. These flames obeyed no natural law, and the despair of the people only seemed to make them burn hotter. From afar, Semeyaza and I watched the tragedy unfold in absolute silence. The gifts, once given, had become curses, and in that moment, Uriel's warning echoed within me. Power without wisdom opens the door to suffering. Azazel, proud and unrepentant, blamed humanity for acting according to what he called their own destructive nature. But in that instant, I saw clearly the darkness within him, a darkness without end. So I turned my back on the horror and returned to the sacred forest, where I had first received my visions. There, slowly and resolutely, I lifted my eyes to the sky, wondering how such wise beings could unleash so much destruction. Perhaps, I thought with dread, Azazel was right. Perhaps the true root of disaster was within humankind itself. With a trembling voice, I called out to the ancient order, begging for an answer, desperate to know whether this was the inevitable fate of my people. At that moment, the world seemed to fall still. I remembered vividly Uriel's voice, assuring me that the higher order had never ignored what had happened. Then, among the stars Semeyaza once taught us to read, a single point of light appeared. Its glow intensified as it descended, carrying a solemn radiance that seemed to crush the breath from my chest. Uriel had returned. His footsteps cast luminous shadows across the ground. His deep, ancient eyes seemed to hold both the first spark of creation and the final dusk of fallen worlds. He walked directly toward me and, with absolute authority, declared that the time had come for the lost order of the universe to be restored. His words fell like cool water upon scorched earth. I dared to hope then, if the great order still looked upon us, maybe there was a chance for our descendants. But what happened next shattered my spirit completely. Uriel revealed that our people had become corrupted by the path they had chosen, and that the ancient order had decreed a sweeping tidal purging, a great cleansing, to reset the broken balance of the world. All would fall, even the innocent who had never taken part in the wrongs committed. My heart shattered at this decree. I could not understand why everyone had to pay for the choices of a few. Yet before the great cleansing, Uriel explained that those who should never have existed, those whose very presence violated the oldest laws preserving balance across countless watching worlds, had to be removed. I did not answer. I felt that Uriel was unlike the other starborn visitors. His presence radiated a purity, as if his words came from the primordial light that shaped the early cosmos. Soon after, Uriel stepped into the heart of our village. Around him, the people stood in reverent silence, staring at the celestial being who moved with unmistakable authority. Uriel confronted Semeyaza, warning him of the gravity of the actions he and his brother had taken. Semeyaza, devastated, finally understood the horror unleashed by his choices. He realized the magnitude of the damage and, carrying a weight of guilt, confessed he could not allow his children to be destroyed. He had already helped Nimruth, Arhan, and Damal escape, hoping that one day they might find redemption. Uriel listened quietly, recognizing the pain Semeyaza carried, recalling, if only for a moment, a similar tragedy that had once unfolded in a distant world. At last, he warned that though the higher order might consider Semeyaza's remorse, his children could not escape cosmic justice forever. Azazel, however, answered with arrogant defiance, rejecting all authority and condemning humanity as worthless and destructive. Uriel responded sternly, declaring that the darker impulses of humankind were meant to surface naturally, without interference from higher beings. From above, gentle rays descended, forming before us the Ohalim, celestial guardians tasked with watching over life across the worlds. Uriel commanded them to find the offspring of Azazel and Semeyaza, ensuring that no earthly force could hide them. Finally, Uriel proclaimed with unshakable authority that Azazel himself would not escape judgment. His hour had been set, and the reckoning would not delay. From afar, I felt the crushing weight of his words. Our world was about to face a verdict no one could prevent. For a long time, Uriel walked among humankind with a clear, unbreakable mission: to locate the descendants of the Watchers. The Ohalim, gifted with the wisdom of Ashtara, swept across the skies in search of the giants. Their movements traced brilliant streaks across the heavens, reminding us that every choice holds the power to create beauty or unleash chaos. They crossed the untouched lands shaped in the earliest days of creation, places never touched by human hands, where nature spoke in its own ancient voice. Across these vast wildernesses wandered Damal and Arhan, exhausted after a long flight. Before their departure, Semeyaza had warned them, "Uriel will not rest until he finds you." As the days passed, the giant's strength gradually faded until they could no longer resist. Even the strongest spirit breaks when hope dies and the heart can no longer find rest. Uriel sensed the signal of an Ohalim and rose gently into the sky, gliding in silence until he reached the giants at dawn. Damal and Arhan, aware of the power approaching, accepted their fate with quiet resignation. Hidden deep within the forest, Nimruth watched them with a cold, determined stare. Sensing he still had one chance left, he turned and ran toward the coast, never once looking back at his brothers. Clumsy and heavy though he was, a fierce spark of survival burned within him. With a voice like rolling thunder, Uriel declared to Damal and Arhan that their existence had defied an eternal law and could not be permitted under the watch of the ancient order. Without warning, he lifted his eyes to the sky. A supernatural storm began to form above the giants, darkening the heavens and filling the air with raw energy. Lightning struck the twins again and again, their massive bodies glowing with each violent surge. Their cries of agony echoed through the valley as their forms slowly dissolved. After one final blinding flash, only drifting blue mist and scattering ash remained. Far away, Nimruth had reached the shore. With desperate strength, he pushed a wooden boat, constructed in secrecy for months, into the rising tide. Casting one last look at the distant horizon, he climbed aboard and steered southward, vanishing into the ocean fog. Back in our village, I sat meditating beside the river. My aging body carried the weight of endless worry, and my spirit trembled from all the conflict and loss I had witnessed. Uriel approached me then, calmly revealing that the fate of the giants had been sealed. Damel and Ahan would bring no more devastation, and Nimruth had fled to barren lands where no power could survive. I also learned that Semeyaza would return to Ashtara, while Azazel would soon face the harvest of everything he had sown. I asked how he managed the balance of so many worlds and stars, and he explained that for the ancient order, immensity itself was part of their nature, present within all things, sustaining equilibrium everywhere. The sky grew heavy, pulsing with a storm forming deep within the clouds. On a desolate mountain peak, Azazel waited defiantly for Uriel's inevitable arrival. Soon, amid lightning that tore through the furious heavens, a radiant sphere descended. Uriel had restored order among the Watchers across many worlds, but never before had he confronted such a grave violation, granting physical form to forbidden hybrids, beings of star and soil. Azazel, filled with mockery and defiance, greeted Uriel with arrogant words, declaring that nothing could undo what had been done or erase the marks carved deep into human memory. Uriel's eyes reflected both disappointment and unwavering resolve. Shaped by the discipline of the temples of Ashtara, where the natural balance of worlds was revered, he spoke sternly of the suffering Azazel had caused, reminding him of the higher purpose once entrusted to him, a purpose that demanded humility and vigilance. Azazel tried to justify his actions, insisting that humanity needed his guidance, claiming he had only revealed their true destructive nature. But Uriel reminded him that only the ancient order, the first light, held the authority to shape worlds, and that the Watcher's purpose had always been to observe, never to interfere. Azazel stepped forward, attempting to display his power, but suddenly he froze in place, unable to move even a single arm. A flicker of confusion and fear crossed Uriel's face. Calm and resolute, Uriel declared that his mission was to restore the balance that had been broken, and that Azazel had become a threat to everything born under the gaze of the first light. As Uriel lifted his eyes to the sky, the clouds responded with a furious storm of thunder. Azazel's body remained motionless, imprisoned by an invisible force that stripped away his will. The fury in his eyes slowly gave way to despair. From the storm above, threads of pure energy descended, binding Azazel in chains of radiant light. Each chain was an unbreakable tether, forged from the very laws of cosmic judgment. Azazel thrashed helplessly as the bindings tightened, pulling him down toward the stone beneath the mountain, sealing him in an inescapable prison, forged by celestial authority. Silence followed. The winds calmed, the clouds receded, and the pale sunlight broke once more across the peak, now a tomb for eternity. Uriel stood for a long moment, staring at the sealed mountain. A trace of sorrow crossed his features, fully aware of the painful duty he had carried out. Since Azazel's burial beneath the mountains, even nature itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. By the riverbank, I waited patiently, knowing the end of my path drew near. My tired eyes held the quiet peace that comes only from understanding. After witnessing truths capable of breaking even the strongest hearts. Uriel appeared again, serene and solemn as ever. He told me the ancient order had watched every step I had taken, and that the time had come for me to leave this world. At first, I refused. I could not bear the thought of abandoning my people. I longed to face whatever disaster awaited them, side by side. I could not understand why humanity was not given a chance to correct its mistakes. With a steady, compassionate firmness, Uriel explained that granting power before its time always leads to ruin, diverting civilizations from the path they were meant to walk. The human spirit, he said, had been stained in ways that could no longer be reversed. When I asked what fate awaited me beyond the mortal world, Uriel assured me that I would witness wonders no human eyes had ever seen, and touch truths only the celestial order could comprehend. He promised me that my legacy would endure through my bloodline, especially through Noah, the one chosen to survive the coming cleansing. A vessel, he said, would be built in secret, and when the skies opened, Noah's family would sail toward a new dawn. His words pierced my soul, filling me with quiet grief for what I would leave behind, and hope for what was yet to come. With humility, I accepted my fate, ready to discover the wonders that the heavens would at last reveal to me. Not far away, on a small hill overlooking the valley, Semeyaza stood beneath the moonlit sky. Beside him, Nama carried the weight of a farewell, heavy enough to break any heart. Semeyaza acknowledged the harm his presence had brought, and knowing he had to face the consequences, whispered his goodbye with tenderness and sorrow. He promised he would forever carry the memory of their moments beneath the stars, dreams he would hold for eternity. Nama stood motionless, feeling her soul fracture as Semeyaza slowly vanished into the radiant sphere of light. In that moment, she understood. Eternity is only an illusion for those who have never loved. All that holds meaning eventually fades, quietly and painfully. Meanwhile, Uriel's sphere waited near the forest. I walked toward it slowly, climbing a slope that felt as though it were made from solid light. As the village shrank beneath me, a deep peace settled inside my heart. I accepted my fate without fear, wondering silently what wonders and truths awaited me beyond the veil. The sphere carried me through a vast expanse, dark and brilliant all at once, pulling me farther from my world until it became nothing more than a tiny green spark. With wide open eyes, I witnessed a panorama no human had ever seen before. First came towering columns of fire, colossal shapes rising from unfathomable depths, twisting upward like living entities supporting hidden worlds. Far ahead, I saw stars that seemed to sing, their harmonies echoing across the void. Each star shimmered with its own voice and color, silver, gold, deep blue, painting the darkness with radiant tones. Later, I beheld immense currents of light bursting forth with indescribable power, like living rivers forged from pure flame flowing across the heavens. In that moment, I understood. Everything I had ever known was only a faint flicker against the endless tapestry of existence, a cosmos filled with beings, forces, and wonders beyond imagination. After passing through a realm that felt woven from silver wind, I reached a boundless world encircled by 3 golden spheres, shining like a suspended jewel in the void. As I moved toward this new destiny, I realized I was witnessing the full grandeur of El Elyo's cosmic design, and my soul would never be the same again. Uriel's sphere entered Ashtara's atmosphere, and before me unfolded a realm whose beauty surpassed all understanding. We descended onto a massive structure atop a glowing mountain, its very stones radiating light. Guided by Uriel, I stepped into a vast hall with crystalline walls shimmering like pure glass. Brilliant pillars supported a ceiling that stretched into infinity, its surface alive with shifting colors. At the center, upon a pedestal carved from unknown gems, stood El Elyor, a being whose form defied human words, a radiant crystalline essence wrapped in an eternal living flame. As I tried to focus my eyes upon his form, the sheer radiance of light and flame blurred every detail. I could only feel an infinite energy emanating life, wisdom, and compassion. I understood then that this was only a shape, a form El Elyor allowed my limited senses to perceive. He was unseen, unbounded, and far beyond even the reach of the watchers. Then his voice echoed deep within me, a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the fabric of my very being. He reminded me that on a corrupted land, I had walked with justice and compassion. He revealed that a time would come when waters would cleanse the world, and that only the bloodline I had guided would be able to begin humanity's story anew. Until that appointed moment, I would remain there, learning hidden truths, so that my testimony could bring light to those who survived the trial ahead. Let those who follow us remember this. Do not give life to what you do not understand. It will not know how to love you, but it will surely know how to judge you.